Hi everyone, my name is Eunjae. I'm a software engineer in Instant Search Squad. So today I'm going to talk about Headless CMS, and this is not a definitive introduction, and it's not a complete comparison among all different kind of Headless CMS services. I'm just going to talk about my personal experience with one Headless CMS service. So let's talk about traditional CMS service first. So traditional CMS like WordPress and services like that. So we have an admin website. So like it should be wordpress.com, and we write some articles and it talks to the server, like WordPress server. They have database and API. So we write to the server and we read from the server. And to client, for example, now we're talking about browser, they receive HTML from this server, meaning they receive a whole website. So it works fine. It's totally normal and it works fine. But what if we want to change some of this HTML? Then we need to do something here. So on this admin, we need to have like some custom input fields or plugins or themes and stuff like that. So we not only write data here, but also we need to manage how to manipulate this HTML outcome. So it gets very complicated. But let's say it's still okay, but the problem happens here. What if we want to have a native mobile apps on iOS or Android? I'm not talking about mobile webs, but I mean iOS apps and Android apps. We cannot receive HTML. Of course, you can receive HTML and display them on web view, but it's not performant. And what if we want to build real native apps? It doesn't work in this model. So Headless CMS is slightly different. Instead of giving us HTML, it just gives us data, as in JSON or stuff like that. So everything is same, but we receive data. And on client side, since we're just receiving JSON data, we can do whatever we want. We can build apps on Android or iOS with the data. We can render native components there, and we can use React, we can use Vue, we can use it anywhere. It's just data. So we can build native components and web, everything. So recently I discovered a headless CMS service named Sanity. So if you go to sanity.io/create, then they create a monorepo for us, and it consists of a studio and a web. So there's a Git repository created for me, and it includes a studio and web. So this studio is like an admin website, and it's automatically deployed to Netlify, like mysite-studio.netlify.com, and this web is also deployed to Netlify, like mysite.netlify.com. So I just go to this studio website, and if I write something, it's written to Sanity database, and I can read it from the database. And when I build this web, I can use Gatsby, Grissom, just React, Vue, or plain HTML with JavaScript or PHP, whatever you want. You're just calling an API and you're receiving the JSON data, so you can do whatever you want. So I'm going to show you some stuff that I have done recently. Before we dive into what I have done recently, so there are other options like before my renewal of my personal website, I've used MDX. If you don't know what MDX is, it's kind of extended version of Markdown. So it looks like Markdown, but there is some JSX going on here. So you can write HTML directly, or you can import React components. So it's kind of a mixture of Markdown and React code. So it's very powerful. But the reason why I got into this Headless CMS was I was trying to build a blog for my wife, but I couldn't teach her. I didn't want to teach her how to use MDX or how to use git commit, git push, to stuff like that. So I wanted to have a proper dashboard. And for myself, it was too annoying for me to git commit every time I make changes. And whenever I don't want to publish something, but I want something inside the Git repository, then I would have to manage some sort of Boolean flag like draft is true, something like that. So I didn't want to do all those stuff. And with Headless CMS, especially with Sanity, I can just write blog posts on my mobile phone, on my mobile browser. So that's why I try this Headless CMS. So, okay, let's see. So this is the project. So we have Studio and Web. Let me open this terminal. So I'm running web project and also studio project locally. It's taking a little while. So web is up. So this is my personal web page I recently made. And this is the admin page. So I go here and I create new blog posts like, hello, everyone. Just ignore this. This is nothing special, nothing serious. Of course, this always happens when we like demo, right? I'm not panicking. Let's try again. So let me update one of my blog posts here. So abandoning a side project here, I added some stuff and it's automatically picked up in this, my local website. And there are so many stuff I put into this dashboard. I can easily customize the schema of this post. So for example, let me open this and edit full screen. I can insert code, right? So I can also assign the language and title and lines to highlight like this. And I want to show line numbers, and maybe I don't want the lines to start with 1, but like 3, and I can still highlight lines like this. So it just works. But how does it work? Actually, Sanity doesn't do much. It just gives me data, and I render all this stuff. So there's a serializer. So if you see here, then I have a component named code, and it receives all the data, and I just render it as a normal React component. So there is no magic, but it's very clear. The studio delivers data and web just renders the data. There's no like mixture of responsibilities. This is very, this was very clear for me, and it was expanding so much possibilities for me. So I can insert Twitter like this. So if I go to Twitter and what is out there, like if I copy this and paste this URL and it's added like that, it's because I'm using one of the Twitter component stuff. So that's how I built my website. And let me show you something else. So I'm not going to run this project again, but this is a project for my wife, which is a recipe blog. And if you see, there's a post schema, and it consists of many different fields like this. So let's see, recipe schema. It has servings, like servings for 2 to 3 people, and descriptions and ingredients, steps, tip, and image. So I can divide stuff into this well-structured data, and I can use this structured data on the front-end side to render whatever I want. So it's very helping the author to write things in structure, but also it doesn't mess up with rendering stuff, and we don't have to scratch our head for mixing all different kind of themes and plugins and stuff like that. So I think there's a very big portion of future in this headless CMS area. So if you're going to build a website, you might want to create an Express app and start your server from scratch. But if you just decide to use one of these CMS services, you can just define your schemas like this, and you have a free admin UI and have this API layer, and you just need to build a renderer. And there are like headless CMS services like Sanity or Contentful or Prismic. By the way, I'm not paid to talk about this stuff. But also there are many headless CMS open source libraries like Prisma and Keystone. There are so many opportunities for them, and it's going to make web developers' life quite easier. Of course, there are cases where you have to start from scratch because you have very complicated structural needs, or like, I don't know. But for many cases, it can cover by headless CMS services or open source projects. So I think it can make things very easier for us. And if you want to learn or try to build your own websites, or just want to talk about this stuff with me, just feel free to ping me, and I'm very happy to talk about this topic.